Hi everybody, this is February 23rd, 2026. I've been posting these videos as a form of therapy for my recovery from the trauma of watching my last surviving relative in Greater Vancouver, my little brother Paul Cairns, 64 with Down syndrome, be locked away by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government, David Eby, as leader for 588 days. So they locked Paul away when they discovered that I had complained to the Burnaby RCMP police about what I alleged to be a secret, fraudulent, and forged power of attorney the government created to give Paul the COVID-19 shot on February 1st of 2021. So a lot has happened in February. I haven't posted anything since, I think, since February 1, but I've written down a lot. I had tried to, I'm a retired lawyer. I was a government psychologist for the government of British Columbia. I was responsible for assessing the mental capacity of adults in British Columbia and assigning IQs to them. And people would get benefits or not, depending on my assessment of them. And it was quite complicated because I had to assign IQ to multi-disabled people, so people who were blind or deaf or physically disabled or they couldn't move. I had to administer IQ tests and assign an IQ to them. And after that, I went to law school and I was a federal prosecutor for a couple of years, and then I was a family lawyer for 23 years. I retired after I had an accident in January 2008. I had an accident and I wasn't able to make a living as a lawyer. I wasn't able to work full-time as a lawyer, and you need to work full-time if you want to be able to support yourself as a lawyer. So that's my background. And I just wrote down a list of the things that I wanted to discuss about February 2026. It's been a very busy month. So on February 1st, Savannah Guthrie, the Today Show host, her mother was abducted in Tucson, Arizona, or just actually in the Catalina Hills behind Tucson, Arizona. And Savannah and her brother and sister did a couple of presentations or TV presentations where they asked that her mother be released. And I just have a couple of comments about that. I noticed that the younger sister, or the older sister, Annie Guthrie, who lived 2 miles or 4 miles from Nancy Guthrie, 84-year-old disabled Nancy Guthrie, who had a pacemaker. Her older daughter, Annie Guthrie, and Annie Guthrie's boyfriend or live-in partner, Tommaso Cioni, lived 4 miles away. They did some presentations asking for their mother's release, and I noticed that Annie Guthrie and her boyfriend, or actually her boyfriend wasn't there at all. He kind of disappeared. But Annie, in my experience, my expertise as a psychologist was in assessing nonverbal communication through vocal quality. So I did a lot of research on assessing what people were communicating with their vocal quality, not by what they were saying. And I noticed about Annie Guthrie that she never looked at the camera, so she didn't look anybody in the eye, so to speak, and she mumbled. So here was a chance for her on 2 occasions to plead for her mother's life to the world, and she mumbled and she didn't look at the camera, or she looked furtive. So I believe that Annie Guthrie knows more than what she's telling police. That's what I think about that. Her boyfriend, her live-in boyfriend, has disappeared and hasn't been seen since February 1st, and there's a saying that flight shows consciousness of guilt. So if somebody disappears after an offense has been committed, that shows, or it can be seen to show, consciousness of guilt. So those are my observations about that. On February 5th, I got my decision from the Supreme Court of Canada. After my brother died on April 23rd of 2024, my then person that David Eby's government had appointed, my brother's guardian who had locked him away, my Catholic nun sister 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario, had applied to have me declared a vexatious litigant. It's a very rare and unusual designation in Canadian law, where you're not allowed to do anything. You can't even file an affidavit with the court without the permission of a judge. She did this after my brother died. I appealed that decision to the Court of Appeal of British Columbia, but I was not successful, and I applied to set that decision aside, that designation of being a vexatious litigant aside. Vexatious for trying to visit my brother after he had been locked away for 588 days, to the Supreme Court of Canada on September 3rd of 2025, and I waited and waited and waited, and finally they said they were going to release the decision on February 5th of 2026. And to be honest, I've been very honest with you guys all along. I haven't had the guts to even look at the decision, so I don't know. But through emails that I've gotten and WhatsApp messages that I've gotten, I assume that, like most people, 80% of people, my application for permission to appeal that designation was dismissed by the Supreme Court of Canada. So that's where I am with that. Tomorrow I'm going to stir up the courage and I'm going to look at the actual decision. I'm sure most of you probably know by now, but I just didn't have the guts. I'm not represented by a lawyer. I have a lawyer who for whom I swear affidavits, but I'm not represented. No lawyer wants to take on this battering ram that the Canadian and British Columbia governments and Catholic Church have directed at me. I don't blame them. So on February 10th, we had another blow where there was a school shooting in Tumbler Ridge, a small town of 2,400 people in British Columbia, a small mining town, where 6 students, 5 were 12 years old and 1 was 13. I'm sorry, 4 were 12 years old, 1 was 11 and 1 was 13. And 2 39-year-old women were killed by a man who believed he was a woman. Was caught up in this transgender insanity. I call it the trans insanity in Canada. This poor young man was pumped full of drugs, and was taking all kinds of drugs on his own. He was taking this cocktail. Basically, he was on a cocktail of drugs. But the happy thing about all of that is the local RCMP detachment were there at the school within 120 seconds, not minutes, seconds. The only thing I wanted to know about how did they respond was, did they confront, how quickly did they confront the shooter? And they confronted him in 2 minutes, within 2 minutes. And it could have been far, far worse. And so I bought a little Valentine's Day card and gave them a Valentine's Day card telling them how courageous I thought they were and how much, you don't know how, that's the one thing you're asked of your police, is that when something like that happens, that they have to run towards the shooter when you're running away. And that's a lot to ask of anyone. My father was a safety engineer underground in Sudbury, in the mines in Sudbury. And when everybody else was running away from a cave-in, he had to run towards the cave-in. And my second common law husband was an RCMP officer, and he got a special commendation for going into a rooming house and confronting a man with a shotgun who had shot up a rooming house. He hadn't killed anybody, but my former common law husband confronted this man, and he got a commendation for it, which we framed and put on the wall. And the other good thing that came out of that horrific situation is that at least last time I checked, $1 million was raised in a GoFundMe for Maya Gabella, the 12-year-old little girl who had been shot but survived the shooting in Tumbler Ridge. Over $1 million. So that's amazing. And also she's breathing and she's doing very well. She's recovering more every day. On the 18th of February was the 50th anniversary of my first wedding in Vancouver, the father of my children, Dale Walker. I still have the name Walker to this day. And unfortunately, also, I missed the 13th of February would have been my father's 113th birthday. He lived to be 100. He lived from Friday, February 13, 1913, till November 22nd of 2013. So he had his 113th birthday in heaven. But also on February 18th, the thing that disturbed me most about this whole difficult, terrible month is that the Conservative Member of Parliament for Edmonton, Matt General, crossed the floor from the Conservative side to the Liberal side, where Mark Carney is the leader. And I was so shocked and upset about that. I worked very hard on this. The last election we had in Canada, the last federal election, was on April 28th of 2025. And I worked so hard. I worked for my candidate in Coquitlam Port Moody, Paul Lambert, who is a wonderful candidate and a wonderful person, and who stood by me through thick and thin to my vexatious litigation. Just a wonderful man. And I worked so hard for him. I've never worked so hard in my life. I have a life-threatening cardiac condition, but I ran up and down 663 houses. I knocked on 663 doors and pitched voting for the Conservative Party of Canada and Paul Lambert. And I knocked on the most doors of any female campaign worker. And I just pushed myself so hard because I so wanted the Conservatives to win. It's time to bring this liberal devastation to an end. And mostly because the first thing that Justin Trudeau did when he was elected on October 19th of 2015 is he brought in the euthanasia, the so-called medical assistance in dying. And since he was elected, 65,000 Canadians have been euthanized by a doctor or nurse administering a lethal injection. That's 20 a day. 5% of all deaths in Canada are caused by a doctor administering a lethal injection. This is extrajudicially. Now, when I was practicing law, all I did was divorces. That was basically all that I did. 50% of the divorce applications that you submit are rejected as being irregular or they don't satisfy the judge. It has to go before a judge, and a judge, an actual trained judge, has to sign off on it. And now in Canada, we're killing people with no, all it takes is the signature of a doctor or a nurse, and they don't have to know the person at all. They don't have to have any experience with the person at all. And if 50% of divorce applications are rejected as being irregular, and you have to go back and correct them, how many of these applications for euthanasia or to be killed are irregular or done with improper? There's no legal advice provided to the person. They can't get a second opinion. We're a disgrace. And I just saw that Matt Walsh, who's a podcaster, he's one of the top podcasters in the United States, and he's saying that Canada should be invaded and made the 51st state because of, he calls us the evil top hat, because of our immoral killing of people. So it's very important that we throw these stinking liberals and that Epstein pool boy Mark Carney out on their ass. He's Irish. I know that type. My mother used to call them the lace curtain Irish. Hoity-toity. They don't, he sent his daughter, he registered his daughter at the Tavistock Clinic in London, which is the shuttered and disgraced pediatric child sex change clinic in London that's being it's been closed, and they are facing thousands, tens of thousands of lawsuits. So anyways, tomorrow I'm going to check and find out. I'm going to look at that decision from the Supreme Court of Canada on my application for permission to appeal my designation as a vexatious litigant and face the music. So wish me luck. I'm in the middle of doing my 10,000 steps. If I make 10,000 steps today, it'll be 7 days in a row. I try and get 7 days in a row of the 10,000 steps. If I miss a day, then you've got to start all over again. So that covers February, and it's been one hell of a horrible month, but we're still standing. I love you all so much. Take care.